Am I looking all right for you?
Yes. Hi, Eric. I want to share. I want to say to everyone, hello. This is the first edition of UX on Coffee. I'm talking to Eric Reiss, the wonderful Eric Reiss. And what we're going to do, Eric, I'm going to explain this to you. This is the format. We're going to have a cup of coffee. I ask you to to prepare a coffee, and I have mine here. Yes. And we're going to talk. We're going to have a discussion, and we're going to drink our coffee as we talk. And the moment the coffee, one of our cups is done, when we finish one of the cups, then I'm going to say to you, hey Eric, it was lovely to talk to you, and the conversation is over. So there's no time frame on this. It's just a cup of coffee with a friend, and we'll see how it goes. The time limit will be based on the coffee cup.
You're in deep trouble, Avi, because I'm a very slow coffee drinker.
Well, I drink it fast, so you
Well,
gotta
I
stick
worked in
with
the
me.
theater for many years, and so the coffee that we drank was often, 3 days old, and we'd scrape off the mold and put in a lot of sugar and milk to make it palatable. And coffee was often something that needed to be gotten over with in a hurry. You have to excuse the cough. I caught a cold in Havana, Cuba, of all places, a couple of weeks ago, and so. If I push my ear, that means I'm muting because I need to cough. And I promise you I will work very, very hard to get over the cold before I come to Israel.
How is the UX community in Cuba? What's going on there?
Well, it's very interesting. I mean, Cuba is a communist country, although their form has little or no relation to the socialist dictatorships that we saw in Central and Eastern Europe. They've created, excuse me, what they call Caribbean communism. As soon as I
Yes.
start to talk, I start to cough, and it's worked extremely well for them. They've survived some, rather harrowing times. First, back in the early '60s, the loss of their biggest trading partner, the United States. More recently, the loss of the Soviet Union as their major trade partner, and yet they've managed to survive. And so, in terms of UX, to get back to your question, interesting things are happening in Havana, and I had the honor to meet with the dean of the School of Journalism at the University of Havana, and they've, and I think rightly so, combined departments that include information technology and journalism and a lot of other things in order to create better communications. This is certainly something that's been tried at other universities, certainly Kent State University outside of Cleveland in the United States, but with varying degrees of success because there are often internal political agendas at universities that mean that one institute doesn't want to give up ownership of, say, library science or journalism or whatever it may be. I think the Cubans are doing a good job. Now, because it is a communist country, though, there are no advertising agencies. There are, you can't do that, but there certainly is a UX community there, and they understand UX, both online and offline.
Okay, great. Um, I'll let you cough. Yes.
Sorry about the coughing.
The reason I wanted to talk to you first of all is because you're coming to Israel to Tel Aviv next month,
Yes, yes.
and
I can't tell you how exciting this is. I grew up in the United States, which explains the accent. Although I had European parents, and I've lived in Copenhagen, Denmark for 40 years now. But the whole idea. Oh yeah, well next year in the Holy Land, and so this year it's nice because I'll actually be able to spend at least one day of Hanukkah with family outside Tel Aviv. So that's very cool.
oh, that's cool. So yeah, you're going to come here right on the last days of Hanukkah.
Yeah, I think the last day of Hanukkah is, and then we have what we're doing on the 15th,
No, the 16th.
the 16th. More coffee, more coffee. So Avi, so I mean, so you've created this crazy format, and I can see your cup says coffee on it. So what happens if you put tea in that cup? Does it not work?
Oh
You
yeah,
know,
that's a good one.
what are the usability limitations of your cup?
It's only for coffee. It's only for coffee.
It's only for coffee.
You told me you have a story on your. What's your story on your coffee cup? We'll
Oh,
talk
it's not
about
really
Israel in a minute, but
very interesting. My parents were given a set of coffee cups, and if you see, it says, uh, for Louise and Eric Reiss.
oh,
It's monogrammed. Somebody sent them these cups. I don't know, back in the early '60s, and we've always had them. I don't know that any of us thought they were particularly pretty, but they're good cups for a couple of reasons. Number one, they're thick at the bottom, but they're not very thick at the top, so they're comfortable to drink from. They have a nice handle,
it's an
but at the
heirloom.
same time,
What, 30
it's an
years?
heirloom. Oh no, this is closer to 50 years.
Wow.
Uh, but they keep the coffee warm for a longer time than a lot of the other mugs that I have. And ugly as it is, I keep it around. And when my mom died a couple of years ago, I think she had 6 of them, and I kept 2 of them because it was sort of nice. It always reminded me of of home. Not that I get particularly sentimental about these kinds of things, but yeah, it was just, I don't know. I like the cup. I like the cup.
All right. So let's go
And
back to
from a usability point of view, it's actually very well designed. Keeps the coffee warm. It's comfortable to drink from. Has a good handle.
great,
What more?
great segue to this, your book. Yes.
Yes, the book.
So your
Yeah,
book is
I like the English version. There are other language versions out there. The German version is very weird. Let me get that for you. And this, with Moses
no,
coming down from the mount,
no way.
is I find completely weird. And it says, Usability Gebote, wie man Webseiten besser macht. And that was certainly not the point of my book, because usability is not is necessarily something that just happens online. I mean, we were just talking about coffee cups. There are good coffee cups. There are bad coffee cups.
Can I see? Can I see that cover again? It seems like
oh, absolutely.
if someone sees that, that could be the Bible too. The Bible returns, right?
Yeah, and that was kind of not my intention, but I had absolutely no control over this. And between you and me, the German translator, I think, took some liberties that I wouldn't have done. Although,
It's the
hats
Bible,
off to
isn't
the
it?
Germans. Yeah, Hitler is mentioned more often than Jared Spool, and they kept this stuff in. And I thought, okay,
Okay.
good. They. I think, in terms of politics and what's happened in Germany, and I also hold German citizenship, which my grandfather would kill me for. When my father was an Austrian Jew, and his father spent a year in prison, and then they managed, and that's a long story in itself, to get out. And when my grandfather came to the United States, lawyer that he was, he refused to sign any papers that said he was a German. And the American immigration authority says, look, Austria doesn't exist. You're German. It says German on your passport with a big purple J. And it says, I refuse to sign anything. And they eventually gave up on him. And so he and my father came into the country as Austrians, a country that did not exist in 1939, whereas my grandmother and my uncle had come in first, and they had signed that they were Germans. And so when the United States entered the war in very, very late 1941, my grandmother and my uncle had to go up to the local police station every Monday morning to register as enemy aliens, whereas my father and my grandfather, they were Austrians, so that was okay.
All right. So I want to go back to a little bit to what we're discussing, the usability stuff. Can you share with me, why did you write this Bible?
Well, I don't know that I'd call it a Bible. I think there are a lot of good usability books out there, and there are a lot of good usability research. I think that the things that the Nielsen Norman group has done, Jakob Nielsen, fellow Dane, has been very, very good. I think that the works that Stephen Krug has written are also absolutely superb.
Yeah.
Certainly don't want to call myself a guru by any means. What I know about usability, I've picked up through empirical experience and having sat through thousands of usability reviews on the other side of the mirror. Nobody lets me actually, do a usability review because I always say, oh, let's just press the red button. Let's move on with it. I'm not a good interviewer in those situations. But I was looking at the other books, and I think that they're very good, and I admire them tremendously. But I wanted something that was useful to people who were on a project team but were not usability experts and had no intention on becoming usability experts. They weren't going to go out and facilitate usability tests and these kinds of things, but I wanted them to start thinking about some generic problems in usability that apply to products both online and offline so that they could become more valuable members of their teams. And there are two sides to the usability coin. One is ease of use, which is things like functionality. When you push a button, is it responsive? And I'm not talking about responsive design, but does the button actually give you some kind of feedback that something's going to happen? Ergonomics, foolproofing things. How do we prevent people from making mistakes? These are all ease of use things, and they have to do with the physical, whatever it is you're designing, be it online or offline. Mm-hmm. The other side of the coin is very interesting, and that's elegance and clarity. And these are all the psychological parts of the usability business. It's like, the old George Berkeley, the Reverend George Berkeley, who wrote a treatise on something in 1710. He was the one who proposed, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it, does it make a noise? And so visibility, or being able to hear things, is important. And we're starting to see this as the pendulum swings back from radical skeuomorphism, where buttons look like physical buttons with lots of shadows and highlights, to flat design, where nobody knows what is clickable, which is maybe okay on a traditional screen where you can move your mouse around, mouseploration I call it, but you can't do that on a tablet. So you have to keep poking the screen and trying to figure out, is this a link? Is it not a link? Visibility is important. Just creating the shared frame of reference that's necessary. If you want people to buy things online, do they understand what they're buying? When Amazon suddenly discounts a book, is it because it's going out of print and they want to clear their stocks, or is there a second edition coming out next week and they want to clear their stocks of the old books? There can be many reasons why things are happening. And so is Amazon explaining, this book is about to go out of print, or, hey, there's a new edition coming down the pike, but
that's clarity, right? How does that help?
All of this has to do with elegance and clarity. And so, predictability. You book an airplane ticket online. How many steps are there going to be in the process? What am I going to be expected to do? We've done here at my company, FatDucks, a lot of work for insurance companies, and they like to sell, for example, car insurance online. That's one of the more popular products. And the good sites let people know up front, hey, you're going to need your registration papers for the car. You're going to have a copy of the driver's licenses of the people who will be driving the car. There's some basic things that you should have on your desk while you fill out our rather complicated forms. And then there are other sites that just sort of dump you into the process, and then suddenly, you're 3 screens in filling out long forms, and you realize, I don't know what size engine my car has. What do I do here? Well, it'll probably be on your registration test, but if registration papers. But if you don't have them handy, then suddenly you have to go out and find out, well, where did I put them? And you get back to the site, and by that time you're probably timed out. So predictability is an important part of usability. And these are all very common sense kinds of things. My point in writing the book, and my point in holding this masterclass, is to share some of my observations and to help people to start to look at their products and services in a little different way so that they can become more productive members of their teams. It's not to create usability experts out of people. However, Stephen Krug's book, Don't Make Me Think, Don't Make Me Think is something that the user says. I don't want to have to guess what this site or this product is expecting me to do. Don't make me think. But as designers of anything, we have to do the thinking, because if we don't do the thinking, nobody else is going to do it for us. We have to think through these problems before they actually occur, and the more we are able to do that, the better the product, and ultimately the greater success in the marketplace.
So this is the side of your, this is what you cover, that perspective.
I cover both perspectives, plus some ideas as to how you can go home the next day and actually do something useful when you don't have the time and you don't have the money, you don't have the people to actually affect major changes. It's very interesting. Sometimes very, very small changes can create an enormous difference in turnover. And so these are also things that I want people to start thinking about. By the way, if you look at the cover of Usable Usability, take a look, because Steve Krug has has a great quote on the back cover.
Where is it?
At the top.
At the top. Oh, I stopped reading because it was tempting to steal stuff. I was tempted to steal stuff from my next book. So that's
I thought, that's about as great a compliment as you can get. And if you look around, Steve has never, ever endorsed a book before. So I'm very proud of that.
Oh, that's great. I want to ask you something that kind of caught my eyes in terms of, you talk a lot about empathy.
Yes.
It's becoming a buzzword recently that I've been keep hearing about, empathy as a tool of design. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, empathy has been a buzzword for several years now, and generally it means, basically understanding the user. But that's the popular definition of it. But I think that empathy goes far beyond that. It's not just understanding the user, but putting yourself in their situation to understand why they're reacting. I studied political science when I was at university. There are a lot of people who I call my friends, whose political views do not coincide with mine. That doesn't mean that I don't like them or I unfriend them on Facebook, but it means that I understand where they're coming from. I understand why they do and why they say the things they do. Empathy is not about agreeing or being subservient, but it's understanding the other person's point of view. Now, that said, empathy also works both ways. Generally, when we're talking about, for example, online products in particular, but actually it applies to everything, people say, oh, we have to understand the users, we have to do our research, we have to do this, we have to do that, and we have to have empathy with our users. But empathy also works the other way. You have to have empathy with the business leaders who have created the business plan that is then being filtered down to some kind of a UX strategy that ultimately is going to result in some products and services. And business leaders are generally not stupid. They may not understand the online world, but they have reasons for doing what they do, and for that reason alone, at FapDocs, we've always brought in developers from the very earliest meetings so that they can actually sit in the boardroom and hear the CEO say what's on his or her mind. This is incredibly important. Just because people don't understand what we do doesn't make them stupid. And so empathy needs to work both ways. And it gets much more complicated than that in reality, because there are all kinds of variants on this. But again, it's not a question of approving of what people are doing, but understanding at least why they have come to the conclusions that they had. And then, of course, you can help shape these conclusions and hopefully move things in a positive direction. But you can't do this in a way that creates animosity. You have to You
Can you
have
give me an
to.
example of how empathy could be a tool, something that we can take and use? I mean, of course, this is rudimentary to user experience design. We have to understand the user. We have to think, what are their needs and wishes. But why empathy is becoming a buzz? Why is that a tool today, or thinking
Well,
in that way?
I think it's become a buzzword because uh, research, the whole discovery phase, is something that has been very difficult to sell to a lot of organizations. The marketing department invariably has customer satisfaction surveys or whatever, which they say, oh, no, no, we don't have to do any research. We understand our users. And, here's your job. Go out and sprinkle your UX pixie dust on top of it and make it all wonderful. And the world doesn't work that way. Often the marketing department has not necessarily asked the right questions, or has asked them in a way that gives them a skewed answer, because the people who are putting the surveys together want a positive response. Um,
Hmm.
a case in point, Amazon.co.uk had something called Amazon Prime, and for £50, excuse me,
It's time for coffee.
for £50 I could sign up for Amazon Prime, and that would give me all kinds of really cool things like one-day shipping and I don't know what all. So I figured, okay, let me look at what Amazon Prime is actually giving me. Now, mind you, I live in Denmark, which is part of the European Union, but is not in the United Kingdom. And I look through it and I say, okay, if they can deliver what they say they can, it's worth the £50 for me to sign up. And I did. And upon signing up, it says, no, this is only available for people within the UK. So I have to ask myself, so why didn't bloody Amazon peg this from the beginning when I was filling out the form and about to give them money and say, whoa, 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 wait, you're buying the wrong product. This isn't a product that applies to you. I couldn't get my money back. I was kind of stuck. I had lost 50 pounds. I wrote several notes to Amazon. I got no response.
And you lost their trust as well. So that's the key
I
point
lost
here.
their trust too. So they certainly hadn't built up the shared reference. I actually knew that I was looking for information that would tell me that this was perhaps not a product that was available in Denmark. And I looked for it and I couldn't find it, only after I had paid them the money.
So through the empathy lens, how do you what's your conclusion here? Like,
Well, all right, but we're going back to these marketing surveys. So about a month ago, I started getting surveys from Amazon.co.uk. Mind you, this business with Prime is a couple of years old. And so, what do you think of Amazon Prime? Because I'm still in their mailing list. And I tried to fill out the forms, and they'd keep sort of booting me off and say, "Oh no, you're in marketing, so you can't answer these questions." At no time was I ever allowed to tell them, yeah, look, guys, you lost my trust, you stole my money, I didn't get the products that you promised to give me, at least publicly before I had signed up. It was a survey designed to elicit a very specific response from a very, very narrow group of people, and I'm not sure that Amazon Prime really learned what they could have learned if somebody had actually just called half a dozen customers to say, so what do you think about this? You always learn something when you talk to a customer, and as long as you make a concerted effort to put yourself in their shoes and to understand their situation, if you do that, their answers start to make sense, and you can see room for improvement. Doesn't mean you have to agree with what they're saying, but you need to understand why they're saying it. If you understand the why, then you can figure out the how.
all right, cool. So I'm almost running out of coffee. I would like for you to kind of speak about we're doing a workshop on the 16th. So
Yes.
who should come to this workshop? What can they learn? I mean, is it for everyone? Is it for experienced designers? Is it for beginners? And what this whole day, it's a full day of just
Yeah.
Yeah, of learning. So
It's a full day of me jabbering and asking questions and having discussions with the people who come. I mean, in theory, anyone could come to this and will get something out of it. Whether you're a startup or whether you're just a freelancer in this industry or whether you're a large organization. And I've done this masterclass for large companies, Siemens and Google, and people seem to get something out of it, whether they're big or they're small companies. But in more practical terms, anyone who is on a team where usability plays a role, and this could be from designing coffee cups to weaving tablecloths to how you're going to set up your restaurant or how often you should be washing the floors in the fruit department in the supermarket, or an online product. This is something that will make you a more valuable member of your team, be able to come with insights and input regarding your specific product that will undoubtedly make it better.
can you give me a little bit of a rundown? What's the agenda, or how do you see the flow of that day?
Well, it's basically in two halves. The first will deal with the ease of use things, and so it's just basic functionality. If a button doesn't work, then it's things don't work. If your forms don't work, you're not going to get conversions. The responsiveness aspect, I mean, is whatever you're using reacting in a sensible way. What about the ergonomics of the situation? If you're designing things for a small screen, are your buttons large enough that you can poke them with a big fat finger?
All right, so there's plenty of things there. So you're going very shortly on things.
So that's
Yeah.
that's the morning. The afternoon. I'm so sorry. The afternoon is primarily elegance and clarity, and here we talk about visibility. Are people able to actually physically see the things they need? Understandable are things. Have we created a shared frame of reference? Amazon Prime did not. It didn't tell me that a very important detail, and that was the product was not available outside the UK. So I didn't have a shared frame of reference with them when I bought the product. Now, in this case, I did buy the product. A lot of people will hesitate from buying a product if they don't have the information they want. And there are a lot of e-commerce websites that say, oh, no, we only have room for a little bitty amount of text, which is kind of crazy because more text outsells short text by something like 41%. There are studies on this.
Even though people don't really read, when it comes to e-commerce, they...
Well, no, but they do read. What they do is they skim and they scan. They skim until they hit a keyword or a trigger word. A keyword is always a noun. A trigger word is always almost always an adjective. So if you're looking for non-iron shirts, you're going to look until you find the word shirt or non-iron, because one is a keyword, one is a trigger word, and then people will start to skim, and then when they find the subhead or whatever it is that they're interested in, they're going to say, okay, well, now I'm going to start reading. No, they don't read your whole page. They're certainly going to read enough of it to have an understanding of what this is about. So that's two of the 5 things that we'll discuss during the afternoon. The others are, is it logical at all? And there are 3 different kinds of logic, whereas the really interesting one is retroductive inference, which we can talk about, big word. Are things consistent? And are things predictable? And then finally, I want to sum up the day saying, okay, look, this is how you put together a game plan so that you can discover what you need to do tomorrow that's easy to do, that's going to create a change, a positive change in your business.
Oh, cool. So,
and get all of this in one day.
Definitely I can see that you're going skimming through the very, very highlights of some of the topics that we'll be talking about. So what's your tip? I mean, if someone wants to create a product, either physical or a website or an app, how do you create a useful stuff? One tip.
Create something that people actually need.
All right.
No, I mean, I had a really interesting conversation with somebody in the UK a couple of years ago who had created an online app that was really weird. And it was very cool, but it was weird. And we had a conversation, an hour and a half. And I said, so who is your target audience? I said, well, we don't really know. We thought this was cool, so we built it. I don't think that that's a good philosophy for product development.
But that's
That doesn't mean that you're solving a well-known problem. It can also be a latent problem that people aren't aware of, or you're going to solve a problem in a new way. I mean, we hear this quote, which is incorrectly attributed to Henry Ford, and say, "Oh, well, if I had listened to focus groups, people would have asked for a faster horse." People very rarely know what they want or what they need, and they'll tell you all kinds of, "Oh, I want to do this, I want to do that." Our job as user experience designers is to look past that and find, fine, how we understand their needs because we have empathy, we know where they're coming from. What can we do to actually fix this problem? Right now, there are, and it's also very easy to draw wrong conclusions from statistics. I mean, just because you think it's a really cool product doesn't necessarily mean the market will think it's a cool product.
yeah.
So that's also something we need to think about. What I was going to say is we have there are a lot of people who look at statistics and misinterpret them. There's a big advertisement in the Danish pink papered business newspaper. It came out yesterday. I can't remember who sent it out, the Carnegie Institute. It's some investment fund. And they have a picture of some African natives all in sort of very colorful garb, all poking at their smartphones. And they're saying, well, mobile pay is now used by 2 out of 3 Africans, and this trend is expanding to the rest of the world. And see, we know all about it. Well, the ad offends me for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's basically saying, okay, you white Europeans, see, you should be smarter than these African natives. I find that pornographically reprehensible. But more importantly, I say it's not answering the basic question. The mobile pay apps were not developed in Africa. They were developed, a lot of them, here in Denmark. And the reason that mobile pay is more prevalent in Africa is that we simply have more corners with banks on them than they have in Africa. It's easier. It's a sensible solution to their problem. The trend is expanding, but not for the reasons suggested by this advertisement. And so if you look at these statistics in isolation, without really truly understanding the big picture, you're going to get a very skewed view of the world. So anyone who reads this ad who happens to be an app developer and says, hey, I got to do a mobile pay application because that's where the money is, if they go to Kenya, they may be able to sell it. But if they're here in Denmark, they're going to find that their sales numbers are far less than they would expect. Because are they solving a problem, or are they just doing a Me Too product? What's the point? What are they trying to accomplish? So good products will solve a problem. Now, it's not just a question of making something incrementally better, but it's really about solving a much larger issue. Now, that said, there are products that get better with small incremental improvements. On the other hand, we also see a lot of incremental improvements that are kind of nonsensical. We've certainly seen flat design. I mean, Skype, for example. My goodness, all of us, in Europe and the Middle East know that, when the Americans wake up on the East and the West Coast, we can't use Skype because the servers can't handle the load. So, trying to talk to the West Coast of the United States at 6 o'clock in the evening, which is 9 in the morning in, say, San Francisco, forget it. You can't do it. And yet, Skype spent millions creating flat design, which was a response to a fashion, but was not actually solving any of the real problems, which was create more server capacity. There are lots of examples of these kinds of things. So flat design, that's it's trend based, or it's fad based, not trend based. And we see a lot of, I mean, my goodness, those of us who use Twitter suddenly, instead of having a little star for a favorite, ooh, now we have to give it a little heart. Yeah, I understand that people favorite things not because they want to put them in a file on Twitter so that they can refer to them later, but it's like a like on Facebook. It's saying, I read your comment and thank you.
There are many uses to that heart or star or whatever.
Well, absolutely, but changing it from a star to a heart is like, um, uh, now I'm not just acknowledging the tweet. I'm actually saying, right, I really like it. And that's a very different thing. And yet, why did Twitter do this? I've tried to talk to people at Twitter, and nobody really has an answer for me. I think it was, like, oh, we just got bored with the old interface. We have to improve something. We have to be innovative. I don't think that's a good way to affect product development. And so the point of this course, to get back to the start of this discussion, is, to help people avoid changes that are changes for the sake of change rather than changes for the sake of improving something. There's an awful lot of that in our industry.
Actually, I have a question. I often wonder why, like, for example, a company like Instagram keeps improving their product, keep adding stuff to their product, even though a lot of people are already using it. Does it improve there's more people join in? I mean, what's the reason to create more features that sometimes make actually the product cumbersome when it's actually working perfectly fine?
Well, yeah, I think that all the social media products, one way or another, are trying to look more and more like each other. I mean, Twitter is certainly doing its best to make it easy to upload photos. They did that, as far as I know, after Instagram sort of really revolutionized this market. Facebook, too. We suddenly see LinkedIn is, this is the publishing spot for business executives who don't have their own blogs. Did LinkedIn have to do that? LinkedIn's original concept was, this is a trusted network. These are people you've worked with that you know that you will vouch for. And yet, a couple of years ago, you press the wrong button and they'll spam your entire Gmail account. I mean, I ended up pressing something wrong, and they send out thousands of invitations, including employees I had fired and people that I never wanted to see again in my life. And I spent the rest of the week writing emails back to people and saying, no, look, this was a mistake. I'm sorry you got spammed. And tried to work my way around it. But LinkedIn has sort of given up on their original concept, which I rather liked, and is now trying to do other things. And then instant messaging and all kinds of instant messaging drives me crazy. I'm an old man. And so I kind of like email because I can keep track of the threads and I know where I have information. But I have conversations that, some of the instant messaging is on Skype, some of it is in LinkedIn, some of it is on Facebook, some of it is in email. Now, I try to coordinate things. Let's say I'm going to go out to a conference and the thread started on LinkedIn, and then we had a Skype conversation, and then there's some emails. I'm trying to figure out, where did somebody actually say when and where this conference is going to be? It's like the things get lost because everybody's trying to copy each other, and I kind of like to see things coordinated in one place. Now, maybe I'm old-fashioned and I just don't have the same kind of spatial ability that the millennials have, but I think things do get dropped through the cracks. And this whole idea that Instagram needs to look more like Facebook or Twitter, I think is a bad idea. I'd like to see more apps that were very, very focused on what they're supposed to do and do it very, very well. I think, if Instagram will send pictures, that would make me very happy. I'd like to see a messaging app that worked, and I'd like to be able to coordinate these through some kind of a common interface. Could be Facebook, but it could certainly be something else.
All right. So I'm on my last sip. Before we go, can you show me there's a lot of books there. What's your favorite book?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I've got lots of. They're all favorites at different times. There are a lot of books. There are a lot of books. I think.
Oh
I
my
don't know.
goodness.
Oh, that's only one wall. I think we have. I
Did
don't
you
know.
read
We
them
have
all?
about. Well, not the Encyclopedia Britannica, but yeah, the other ones certainly.
Wow. There's no one that you can pick out
And then
that you like to look
I
at?
keep giving away books because I don't have room for more for more shelf space. So I need to thin out. But my favorite books, I honestly, I couldn't answer that. Um,
They're all your kids.
well, there's some of them that I don't like, but I keep them around because, I have to. There's certainly, you know, books about politics where I just violently disagree with the authors. But from a historical perspective, I feel an obligation to keep them around.
Tell me, I mean, today's fashion is actually not to keep books, is to get the e-version. What's your opinion? Because I mean, these are monuments of your knowledge, right?
Well, I had a I had a friend who used to say, "Oh yeah, it's cultural wallpaper," uh, and I understand that people like the Kindle. I like books because I write in the margins, and I'll often, I'll make a star or a note, and then on the very back page of the book, I'll write down which page numbers had interesting things that I should refer to. So I also use them as a filing system. So if I go to books, I'll find articles that I've cut out of the newspaper or something else that relate to whatever this book's topic is.
Okay.
And I can't do that with a Kindle, um, or some other kind of e-reader. I like books. I find them useful,
All right.
and I can.
It's done.
Oh my God. Cough, cough. Well, listen, thank you, Avi, for putting up with my
Yes.
cough, and thank you, listeners, for listening to
Thank
this
you,
long
Eric.
ramble. I'm out too.
Let's do it. So
It's been a joy being here, and I hope to see a
it
lot
was
of you
great to talk to you
when I
again, and I'll
visit
see you
Tel
soon
Aviv.
in Tel Aviv.
I know, it's going to be wonderful. Shakshuka.
Yes. See you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Shalom.